Welcome to Sparks 1524. I'm Nathaniel Miller. I want to be a writer. How do I start? That's a question often posed by people hoping to present the potential to press a pen to paper, producing prodigiously potent prose while enjoying a luxuriously loquacious literary career. In other words, people want to know how to start writing. That's a question writers get asked all the time. I've been asked it with increasing frequency since becoming consistent with my blog here and, of course, publishing my first two novels, Proud Lion and The Norfolk Murders. Other writers get this same question, and I find it interesting because other artists don't get asked the same question. People don't walk up to a painter and say, "How do I become a painter?" or "How do I become a sculptor?" And I think a lot of it's because those disciplines, those arts, are very physical. We can watch the painter maneuver the brush and apply the colors from the palette to the canvas. We can watch the sculptor hammer away and polish and chisel, removing the stone to reveal the figure. We can see the physical process of the actual creation. Writing, though, kind of presents a magical approach. Even when you look at a writer's rough draft, you're looking at the completed product. It just kind of seemed to spring forth from nothing. But all the activity up here, all the synapses firing off, the ideas developing, the dialogue being created, the characters that are forming, you don't see that happening. Now, when I have people ask me, how do I become a writer? I've discerned there are two different people asking these questions. Some of these people are asking, how do they start writing? Other people are asking, how do I become a published writer? Well, becoming published is a whole different kettle of fish, and I will deal with that one in a later series of columns and videos. But this series of Writer's Craft videos and columns are going to deal with how to start writing. Now, the easiest thing to say, of course, is, how do I start writing? Well, start writing. That, of course, is the pat, plastic, and patronizingly obvious answer to give. And anybody who gives it without a thought is either just being really dismissive of you, or they've forgotten the long journey they took learning how to be a writer themselves. Once you start writing, once you kind of hit that critical mass and you know what you want to do and how you want to do it, and you start branching out into your worlds, it can be very easy to forget that it might have taken you, and probably did, a very long time to get there. The pen is mightier than the sword. But if you think about how long it takes to learn how to wield a sword properly, it can take even longer to learn how to wield this. Before you learn to start writing, learn how to be a writer, before you learn how to find the discipline to sit down and type or longhand or whatever it is, you've got to do something more basic. Don't put the cart before the horse. Before you can start writing, you've got to know what you want to write about. That's the hardest thing. I'm in an enviable position, but it took me 30 years to get here. I am now a full-time self-employed novelist and blogger. I am my own boss, and all I do is write. But for most of the last 30 years, between going to college, being active duty in the Navy, working as a federal civilian for a while, I had a full-time job that did not involve being a novelist. Most people holding down traditional jobs have to think about this. Writing is hard work, mentally, emotionally, and even physically after a while. If you're sitting there writing and you're really into something, you start to kind of look like Quasimodo as you hunch over. I got this chapter I must finish. Anyway, I'm better now. You first got to decide what really interests you versus what merely interests you, because this is a lot of work. It takes time to develop, it takes time to explore, so you've got to decide what really motivates you versus what just motivates you. The really in those statements is going to be that little bit that takes you past not picking up the pen or the computer keyboard, whatever metaphor you want, because you're dead tired after work and you had a bad day and the boss was in a foul mood. If something only interests you, you're liable to just forget it, watch TV, or do something else to relax. But if something really interests you, that's going to give you that motivation that night when you're dead tired and the boss had a bad day, etc., to still sit down and write. I love detective stories. I read every Sherlock Holmes story written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle when I was 14 years old. It took me 1 month, read them all. Yeah, by the way, I was also a nerd and proud of it. I also love science fiction. I grew up with my imagination soaring on the Starship Enterprise and fighting lightsaber duels with Luke Skywalker. So clearly for me personally, I'm really interested in detective stories and science fiction. It's not a coincidence that my first published novels are the Accidental Detective series. Because they really interest me and I really keyed in on the detective stories, that's what I started working on while I was still active duty in the Navy, because that really interested me was the motivation to sit down and write at night or on the weekends when I was dead tired after work. That's the first thing you got to do, but it takes time to do this. Human beings, we are like the TARDIS in Doctor Who. We are bigger on the inside than the outside. That's why it takes us so long to get to know ourselves and kind of figure ourselves out during life. Being a writer is intricately involved in figuring out who you are. As you figure out what interests you and what really interests you, you are figuring out who you are, what you want, and where you're going. Don't be put off if this takes some time. The next part of this series, we will deal more with the mechanical part of writing. How do you sit down and start practicing writing? How do you hone your craft? How do you sharpen your pen's blade so you can whip it across that page and make the point that you want to make? No more, no less. Part 3, we'll get into some more ideas about how you can branch out, how you can develop characters, things like that. But this part, I just want you to think about what interests you and what really interests you. I've spent almost 30 years as an adult, I'm not talking about growing up as a kid, just 30 years almost as an adult. I'm going to be 50 in November, so yeah, I can say 30 years now. Learning who I am, what I want, and where I'm going. And part of that journey was by learning what I wanted to write about. So the first thing in the answer, the first thing you have to do if you want to be a writer, forget writing, forget sitting down and typing. Figure out what you want, what you're interested in, and what you're really interested in. Keep doing that. Enjoy the false start. You will learn something even from a false start. And that false start might end up circling around many years later to being something really good for you. So until next time, always experience wonder, think independently, explore not just the world, but explore yourself and what interests you. And until we meet again, remember to go and do some great things.